Welcome to the show, everyone. I have Drew R. Carr, and he prioritizes focus, connection, and psychology. I'm very grateful for your time, Drew, and I appreciate your willingness to come on and provide value for the listeners. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about our discussion today.
Yeah, we're going to provide good value, and it comes with the premise that every day we will be learning. We are not going to arrive, and having a natural curiosity for growth is a huge root to our self-improvement. So the first question let's start off with is, what situation made you realize we become who we surround ourselves with?
It's a really interesting question, because I think at its face value, like people will buck against that, like even that notion, the idea that we become who we're with. Um, and I come through it from a scientist perspective as well as just like a human. And the scientist in me, the research is very clear. Um, you know, our community, our environment, our schools, our nation, like those all give us the values, the language, and the general acceptable behaviors that we have. Like that's been borne out from the science for many years. But for me personally, I think about like different zones in my life, and I think about playing team sports. I grew up playing football, small town Texas kid, and there was just multiple times where I did some pretty amazing things. I was a defensive lineman, but I got pumped up one time and intercepted a ball and scored a touchdown. It was largely because just the encouragement of all the people around me, and just like being hyped up. And on the same level, like we did a lot of stuff that was not consistent with my values growing up, because like that's what you do in a small town in Texas. You go out and you party, you go do some wild and crazy things. So like I could see me becoming those people. And yet at the same time, I would go to like a church camp or some type of religious group, and I could be very spiritual in those moments. And just because those people were the people who I was around at the time. And we even see this, like I even see it in my life now. I recently moved to Nevada, and I'm with people who are outdoors all the time. And I learned to climb, and I learned to hike, and I learned to snowboard, and just be a lot more chill in general than where I was living in Southern California, where everyone would want to go out and party all the time. And so on a very basic level, the people that you're with, just because of their shared interests and activities, like you start doing those things, and eventually your thoughts start becoming their thoughts. And I started recognizing like some of the things I'm starting to value now are very, very different than even who they were a couple of years ago. And it's largely because I'm surrounded by people who just value things differently.
It's interesting because I like how you mentioned, even though you knew in the small Texas town, maybe that partying was not of your most important values. We have to experiment as humans, because if we don't get outside of our little comfort zone, for example, you need bad days to understand how appreciated you should be of the good days. And I like how you brought up football, because I can relate. I played football as well. And it's mind-blowing how egotistical I was as a football player. And it was rooted in the fact that that's how the team thought. We were football players we lifted weights, and that's just naturally how football players are. They have big egos. And now, being 6-7 years out of playing football, I still, of course, we all have that strong ego still, but we can kind of balance it with our deeper self. And I often not battle, but I can differentiate between when my ego is talking or when my true inner self is speaking. It's really interesting how who we surround ourselves does affect how we act, how we think, that what we actually partake in. And it's a concept that we really have to go through and realize when I'm around this set of people, it takes time to reflect. If we don't reflect, we're never going to really understand how groups and certain people affect us. But that's why I do really encourage journaling or reading, because getting into a flow state gives us that opportunity to actually look back on ourselves and have less of a distracted state of mind. When you get into a calmer flowing state, even this conversation right here, nothing else is going through my head but listening and speaking, and it's very natural. That's something that I encourage more people to get themselves into.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I think one key piece in there is you know how to differentiate between different parts of yourselves. And when you're able to speak at that more centered part of you, um, and part about this original question is, how do you know that you're getting influenced by other people? Well, it's you know yourself well enough, you know that inner voice well enough to know when you're in that calm state, that enlightened state, when you're being as best as you are. Because often what happens when you're in large groups, like that part of you goes away just because you're in the midst of everything else. It's easy to lose you in the sake of everyone who's around you. And yes, you need that time alone in order to do that. I know for me personally, I tend to like the excitement of lots of other people, and I think it's really fun and like to get in the mix, and it's very engaging. And yet, like, I know that if I'm doing that day after day after day and not taking any time for me and not actually putting up guardrails and intention, like you would almost like a child, like you say, all right, you can go out 2 nights a week, and then the rest of the night you're staying home, not to be grounded, but just because you need to take care of yourself. But that for me is vital, because I lose that sense of groundedness because I want to be in everyone else's life and engage that way. And I think that's how we're built. And so it's a way to work against our own social nature, is just to say, slow down, pay attention to you, pay attention to the things that are actually important to you. And to see, is this the kind of crew that is actually leading you towards the goals that you want to be going towards? Because often you'll see that they're not.
And that's a good point of, first, to have the goals in mind, we have to get clear, what do we even value? And that is something that is often overlooked. Until I grew up a little bit, I didn't understand what was on my top priority list. But going back to the alone time, and you mentioned that being in Nevada has less stress, probably number one, because you're surrounding yourself with different people, but I believe you mentioned nature as well. And that's a big piece that helps me get grounded. And I love the idea that we kind of have to treat ourselves like children. You want to stay in for 5 nights of the week, because we don't want to have no fun, but we need balance. And to be grounded, that's where we can spend that time being in solitude. I heard this quote maybe earlier this week: the man who can spend time in solitude, that's one of the most underlooked but important skills to have, because so many people really can't sit with their thoughts. And that leads into the continuous distractions of today's society, where people will numb themselves almost unaware that that is what they're doing by not being able to be alone or continuously drinking and partying. Like, there is a fine line between having fun and losing the clarity of who you really are. It's all a continuous journey, right? You don't really figure this out overnight. It takes a long time to figure out what works for oneself.
To be able to distinguish excitement from actual joy is a huge, growth curve. I think we are really good as a culture at selling excitement, selling engagement, selling, just being on an arousal curve all the time, that we don't really know how to slow down and actually enjoy our lives that well. I mean, it doesn't sell well to say, like, here's you sitting on a porch and reflecting and sitting in the sun. Like, there's no product to sell on that. And yet, like, that for me and for most of the people I end up working with, once they get that ability, once I have learned to get that ability, then life becomes unlocked. You don't have to rely on the next biggest thing, the next whatever, to tell you everything is okay. And I do think, to your point, nature does help me with that. I look at the mountain. The mountain doesn't need anything. It's just there. It's gonna be there. It doesn't care if it gets snowed on. It doesn't care if it gets rained on or no one goes. More recently, it doesn't care if there's a fire on it. Like, it will still be there. And we too can be that way. But for me, I need copious amounts of slow time to do that, to remind myself. Because the other thing that's a little insidious, most of the friends that you have, or most of the people, are still indoctrinated in the same ideas about exciting parts of the world. Like, I should get the newest, coolest snowboard. I should get the newest, coolest gear, or go out every week or drink all the time. Like, that's what it's said. I mean, that's what many people say to do to be happy. And so it's really easy to get those ideas reinforced just by going out and having friends. So you have to slow down. And for me, like, one of my mentors, he talks a lot about his stories about addiction. And he said some days the biggest days of progress he ever had was just doing nothing at all and just sitting in his hands, like, literally, because he didn't fuck anything up. Oops, sorry. He didn't mess anything up at that point. And I think there's truth to that. Like, sometimes the biggest step forward we can have in our life is literally doing nothing, if doing nothing is a step in a better direction than harming yourself by numbing, harming yourself through drinking, harming yourself through all the ways that we lose ourselves.
There's a lot to unpack. You gave plenty of good points. And to start, it doesn't sell well to sit in front of the sun on a nice morning and say that this is joy, this is happiness. And that I have a problem with society in the manner that they push things that are directly unhealthy for humans. And I think this is one of the best ways to solve that, rather than getting angry or losing my cool. Talk about how humans can be healthier and happier, rather than get so angry at the fact that all the commercials, there's so many beer commercials. There is a lack of commercials telling you to go for a walk unplugged and notice the leaves and appreciate the sunset. Or look at those birds, how naturally beautiful these creatures and animals are. There's so much to appreciate that society does not encourage. And as a young man, I'm glad I'm realizing this early rather than being in the facade that I need the Lamborghini. And once I get that, then I'll be happy. I already know that is not the truth. Happiness is something that is worth working for, that doesn't happen overnight. And it's more so a shift of how we perceive everything. And it takes time. I love how you mentioned your mentor. Oh, small wins, just sitting on your hands. Hey, if I didn't fuck anything up, that's good. Like, it is completely amazing to appreciate the smallest of good moments. You don't need a golden toilet to feel good. And what's the difference of laying on a golden bed in a wooden bed? As long as you're comfortable, appreciate what you have and be grateful. But yet again, we're at a tough point because this doesn't sell well. I think the best way to get this across is to lead by example. Hey, if more people see that living a minimalistic lifestyle brings happiness to people, and if it's rough with social media because the younger generations look, and there's a lot of gurus out there who all they do is shine their materialistic goods. It is the new religion of materialism. But there's also our part of Twitter that is almost revolutionary, because we have nothing but constructive criticism and support and healthy facts for younger people. And it's a battle for sure, but I think we're on an amazing track. The information we're sharing, that you get happiness from connectivity, from having deep conversations, by solitude and learning how to enjoy solitude. There's a lot to this unshared aspect of human health and mental health.
Yeah, I do appreciate that there's people who are actually wanting to have these conversations. I think it's great. I do think it's great. Anyone who has an opportunity to slow down and actually experience it will know it from themselves. It's just getting that word out, and this is part of it. But I think the hard thing, and I think you mentioned it, is how to make it seem to others like it's valuable. And I think the way of doing that is actually having conversations. One of the things that I do like about these conversations generally, as opposed to even just tweeting, and I love to tweet, it's fun, is because you really get to see the quality and character of a person in how they speak, in what they talk about. And like, there is a cool veneer for the people who can sell, and it's interesting. We're in an interesting place, especially on Twitter, because lots of people are trying to sell. Lots of people are trying to sell their copywriting services or whatever, and so they can say things really nicely. And yet, like, if you actually listen, if you get a chance to hear them, there's a lacking of solidness, a lacking of depth often there. It's almost like, like they're repeating someone's line. But the chance to actually live it out is where I think we need to go next. Because there is a certain solidness, I think, about several of my friends that I've met through the Twitter spaces and just in life, that they don't have to worry about the frantic pull to get more followers, frantic pull to like seem cool. You just are, because you emanate it. Like, it's just, who you are, and that is what's important. And I wish for all the people who are really good to blow up, and I think it will happen eventually. But more importantly is, once you actually come out and show who you are, people see that and they resonate with it. And it might not be today, but just kind of like a tree that it starts out very, very small, but over time grows and becomes very big. Like, the more you nurture it, the more you show up, the more you just prepare the way, people say, like, that's something I actually want to be. And so I think these conversations are important, and it's important to have the courage to do it, because I think the hard part is those of us who are more in this journey often have had to know more about like painful things, because that is what's often in the quiet. That's often the thing that we're trying to avoid. Um, the thing we're trying to numb down is our own insecurity, um, or isolation or whatnot. And yet, like, once you get to know those demons, those voices, those whatever you want to call them, those pains, people can see that, oh my God, this person can actually face anything. And that's pretty amazing.
Once we get in touch with our fears, our demons, we should not be scared of them anymore. It's those pain points that teach us so much. And it's hard to understand that phrase sometimes when you're distracted and you're unable to deeply reflect upon how you see yourself, how you treat other people, and how you carry yourself, what that does for the environment around you. I do like your point of we have to have a strong self-image before the followers, or we have to be able to put ourselves out there and be courageous enough to take risk, because if we don't take the risk, that limits our ability to grow. So it's a fine line, but nothing grows in comfort. So there's a lot of good, healthy ideas that I've taken from people like Jordan Peterson and other podcasters that have built me up into a person who says, I'm going to get my value from the people that I really respect. And anyone else, their opinions, if I don't know what they value, if they have not earned a high stature in my perception, why am I going to be offended by someone's opinion like that? So it takes a long time to come to that realization. In high school, when I was younger, everyone's opinion mattered to me, every single person's opinion. I grew up as such a people pleaser. And now I realize true happiness comes from having a small circle, but the small circle who is honest with you, who supports you, but they're not afraid to correct you and completely not sugarcoat the truth. You need those people around, and that does translate back into our beginning idea. The people who we surround ourselves with really make a big impact on who we become, and it can't be underestimated. Pay close attention to your little group, because I don't spend too much time with many of my high school friends, but by switching the way that I spend time into listening to people, whether it's having a good conversation with you, you have a PhD. I'm blessed to speak with such a, what's the word? We'll just say intelligent man, but I was looking for more of a, you're very professional. To have a PhD, that is a professional aspect of someone's business and life. And I have an associate's degree. So to speak with you, that is directly helping me. It's like the proof is in the pudding. Just put yourself out there, and it all starts with having the self-image. We have to really get rid of that self-doubt. And I think that's rooted in taking action and having a routine and a structure, which is very important to me.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot of different ways to conceptualize what we do in human psychology generally. And what I like about what you just said, taking action is a huge part of who we are. And even the idea of ourself, like I come from a perspective that says like everything that we do is a behavior, everything that we do, including thinking, including emotions, like those are things that we act on, those are things that we do. And so even who we are and who we conceive of ourselves, of who we are, is something that we can do. Like, So choosing to put on a role, that's something that we do. Choosing to believe in ourselves is something that we do. And we should be putting as much active energy into working on ourselves, working on that who we're becoming. And the way we do that is through taking actions, through taking actions and then looking at the end of the day, wow, look at what I actually did. Not what my mind says I thought I did, not the evaluation of how it went to go. Like at the end of this interview, I'll probably say like, my mind will probably be like, I should have said this different, blah, 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 blah. And I'll just kind of go through the head trash. But then if I look at the paper, no, you did the interview. You talked. You shared some knowledge to some level. And like, that's really great things. After I finish the day, I'll probably go on a walk, do some exercise. And if I look across the day and across my week, if I've checked off enough of those boxes, I can say, wow, I actually am accomplishing something. I'm actually doing something and capable of doing it. And that's so different than maybe how your mind's going to evaluate you or judge you or say that you should be doing something else, because your mind never actually helps you accomplish very much when it's in that evaluative mode. But if we see with our eyes the things that we're able to accomplish, even if they're very small steps, we learn to trust ourselves more to take on bigger steps. Okay, cool. So this week, you might not be in a great place. I work with people who are in pretty rough shape, especially in my day job. And so we start at the very basics, like people who aren't able to rarely get out of bed or can't stop drinking. So if in the first week we can get them like out of bed a few days a week, like that's a huge win. But then they start seeing, oh my gosh, I did it today. Maybe there's other things I can possibly do. And so what normally happens though is we don't take time to actually plan out our action, to make that intentional, follow through, and then observe, did we actually do the thing? Because we normally do from thing to 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 thing, and we don't take time to recognize what we're doing, or we're just responding because we feel like we have to. So I think you're absolutely right. Our self-concept is rooted in action, but also one of those primary actions is planning and reflection.
And that does bring me back to the importance of solitude, because whether the average Joe likes to admit it or not, you can't reflect and plan when you're at a party or around 5 friends. You need to be alone to figure out what's working for you. And I love how you said that. It's so easy to be self-critical. Oh, I didn't say this. Oh, was I not perfect at every moment of the podcast? Okay, how about you did the podcast? Give yourself the appreciation for the small wins. When anything big comes from moments of doubt, and we just have to be consistent. And a good mindset shift that I try to have is I want to make my low quality days better or equal to my best days of my previous self. And I'm seeing that happen. Today's low quality days are much better than myself 2 years ago on my best days. And that is a sign of growth. It is the stacking brick by brick. I love the quote, nothing great happens overnight, because everything takes slow, consistent effort. And going back to your day job, that the small win of having an alcoholic or someone who has been bedridden for a long time, standing up for 5 minutes or walking for a couple minutes, that is amazing. And it's easy to not appreciate that, to say, oh, I wish I could run, or I wish this. But this is exactly why I love the psychology, the mindset, the neuroscience of the human brain and consciousness, because it's overlooked. If we shift our mindsets and change our perception to be of gratitude and appreciate the smaller wins, everything gets more pleasurable. And I think that's what all humans want, but they chase it in more of a materialistic tone rather than realizing I just need to do mental work. It's a hard sell.
Yeah. Well, I we're critters that orient towards physical objects, right? So, and it makes sense, like evolutionarily, we want food. We want something that we can grasp, we can tangible, we can hold, we can see. So this means that I've done something. And I think that's why it's so easy to be like the car, the third house, the trophy wife, the thing that shows that I am worth something, because like I can actually see it. When internal work, it's inherently hard. Like I love your perspective that you're trying to make your best day today, or sorry, your worst day today better than it was a couple of years ago. Like that's an awesome perspective. And yet the way most people's psychology work, and you might be a more enlightened being than most, but the our experience today, our feelings today, regardless of, if you're the king of the world, has $1 million, generally enlightened most of the time, and yet like you have a negative thought, it can feel, at least inside, as worse as you've ever been, like the worst moment in your entire life. And you'll think, I haven't changed, because your own personal experience, at least in the moment, is so overwhelming. And it's hard to track that like objectively, unless you're doing it with some external source, like a journal, like something else to help you frame your thoughts. But it doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that that is the power of our emotions. And in a real way, like, it kind of doesn't matter what it was like 2 years ago, because this is the only body that we have, and this moment is the only one that we have. And the new hard is the one that you have to deal with. And so I think it takes a lot of hurdles for people to want to work on themselves, because it's an ongoing process. And I think there's something inherently we know about that. And that's what makes it just so much easier to look externally. Like, we will never be in the unfinished or in the finished business. I think you mentioned that earlier. Like the only time we will stop growing is when we die. And that's the time you stop. And so that just can seem from the outset exhausting. And why bother? And yet, like, it also can be enlivening and say, like, oh my gosh, I'm here. Look at how much potential I have. Look how much further I can go. And that choice, at least for me, helps me motivate through my life and helps me choose in the morning to get up. And even when in the morning I'm like, it's cold, it's like 20 degrees, I'd rather snuggle in my bed because it's nice and warm. And it's like, well, you can, it's an option. How much better will it be outside of it though? And that's the choice that we get to freely make every day. I'm not saying I choose the right. I choose the noble one every day, but I do more now than I used to.
It's very hard when it's not a clear defined choice. We have options. And I think something that is so important is the bigger picture. Do I want to sit in bed and be cozy, or do I have value to share with people? And it really is not something easy. And that brings us back to the big perception of shifting your mindset, knowing what is most important to you. Is instant gratification my priority, or do I have a vision for who I want to become and what people, I'm not a huge fan of the term legacy because kind of like you said, it doesn't really matter who I was 2 years ago. What matters is me right now and how I'm carrying myself at this moment. But there is some sort of benefit of understanding the bigger picture.
Mhm.
And it's very intertwined. There are so many concepts that sometimes they serve us and sometimes they don't serve us. And I think that's the importance of continuous learning,
Mhm.
understanding there's so much more that we don't know than what we do know. And as long as you are continuously curious and aiming to share value with people, a big thing for me is building humans. I remember how hopeless or how corrupt my perception of life was just recently. And now that I am much more fulfilled, having a bigger goal, trying to help other humans, it makes each day for me more enjoyable. And just having that vision is a powerful key that once you, whatever it is, whether you said that you're working with humans that are really in a tough state of mind. I bet that is a big challenge for you, but it also has to be very fulfilling because you know the work that you're doing and the effort you're putting forth is for a bigger purpose. It's bigger than you. You're literally changing someone's life. And when you don't need to change everyone's life. If you change one person's life, who knows, maybe they change their family's life. And if the perception, how we view things is very astronomically important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that just goes back to how do you want to build your life? Um, because there are many people in my job, um, definitely over time, who the job gets to them, and it is a job, and it's something, it's a paycheck or a way to like, you know, just to get through the day. So that's an option. I mean, you can do anything in that same manner. But I think again, how you build your life is a choice that you make. Like, what do you want in it, and how do you want to connect yourself to it? Um, you might even decide like building humans eventually becomes a job and not a purpose. And when that happens, we again have to slow down and say, what do I really want? What is this life about? Okay, I'm going to help humans, but why? And for me, it's on a deeper level. People suffer, and my own life suffers. But I know that when I am working to help others, I feel more alive. When I actually slow down to do it and build the emotional, the emotional characteristics that I want my life to revolve around, my life is better. And then some days it does seem like work, and some days it seems easy. But the the biggest thing for me is every single day you always have a choice to make it that way. Um, you don't have a choice of what, the resources that you have around you. You don't have a choice of even how every single day that led you up to here, but you do have a choice today what you want your mindset to be. You have a choice every single day of what you want to bring to this moment. And from that, for me, it's given me more sense of power than anything else. Um, and what's what I hope that all people can find is whatever it is in them that in each moment. Viktor Frankl could find purpose in a Nazi concentration camp, when he was faced with watching all of his friends and family and countrymen and die, and he could still find meaning and power and freedom. And it makes me think that, maybe, just maybe, regardless of what situation we're in, yep, we can find some freedom ourselves.
It's a mindset shift that when you participate in it, like we said, there isn't a finish line, but you have a choice, and it's a worthwhile choice to decide I'm going to make the best of what I have. Back in the Industrial Revolution, people had no other option but work 80 hours a week, or with Viktor Frankl, being in a concentration camp. Remembering that humans live through that, and then put myself in their shoes, or think about how lucky I am. Sometimes I complain, and I have a house with so much resources. I am enjoying my life so much, but at the same time, that negative voice can be so loud. And we have to take a step back and really appreciate what we have. How do we do that? Read books and consume content that reminds us that we are truly blessed, that our opportunities are so abundant. And it's interesting how some people at your work, and even you at some days, will get caught up in viewing it just as a paycheck or a job. But it goes back to making the choice. When you wake up in the morning, if you choose to, even if you do have to go to work, how can we make the best out of today? How can I appreciate the smaller things? And this is something that takes a lot of persistent effort, but it's worth the effort. Once we're able to shift our minds to a more enlightened tone, everything becomes a bit better, and the darker days become not so dark. And then the brightest of days are able to be fully enjoyed. We are there. I see this picture sometimes of the dog with the thought bubble and the human with the thought bubble. Humans thinking of cars, girls, and everything else. The dog is thinking of the moment. How can we have that state of mind more often? I think personally, I do meditation usually in the morning and at night. That helps me. It's just binaural beats, a tone of music that calms my brain simply. It's not that I eliminate my thoughts, not at all. I still have thoughts, but for some reason, the tone of the music calms me. And that goes back to our nature talk and the importance of solitude, reading and journaling. We need structure in life. It's amazing to have materialistic goods, but we need that routine and habits that are going to keep us grounded.
I think I also think that's why it's so easy to get caught up in materialism, is because it's in some ways easier to have your structure be dictated by the maintenance of your house, the maintenance of your life, the other people keeping up appearances, as opposed to doing the hard work of creating your own, and staying with it. But my thing with that is like, I hear lots of clients talk about it, even let's be honest, myself, on the mornings when it's hard, on the mornings when you'd rather be, to drink away your problems, or to sleep away your problems, or to eat away your problems. That's painful too, right? Like going through those things are hard, and they're hard on your body, they're hard on your mind, and then you start going through a mind trip of like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, oh my goodness, and all that stuff. So we have to be really honest. Like, if we choose to go that way, choose to go to the life of like just checking out, you're also choosing pain. So you have to choose which pain you want, really. Like, and you don't get out of life without it. And so I love that, I have my own dog, and I tend to think he's a bit more thoughtful than most. He's a border collie, so he's a little obsessive all the time. But there are times where he's just like sprawled out on the couch. I just laying out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm gonna get this done. I got these projects, I got this thing to do, and that, and he just looking at me, and he's like, "This is great. This is a great day." And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm gonna sprawl out on the couch, just kind of do one of these, and that's pretty great. And that's all you really need. And I take some inspiration from him to help me choose my heart. Choosing my heart today often means not getting some of the work done, moving things as fast as I want, and yet like I want to continue having a good life all of my life. So I'm going to choose the heart that's going to let me do that.
Choose your heart, that resonates so well with me, because I think just like that all the time. Here's an example. If I walk my dogs, maybe I don't want to go outside. Maybe it's cold. Maybe it's rainy. But that's the hard I prefer, rather than sitting inside seeing my dog sad because they didn't get exercise. Or do I want to go to the gym today? Maybe I don't. But do I want to be not looking good and not feeling good? There's another one. There's so many. Do you want to be poor, or do you want to build something and be able to provide for your family? Both are hard. So it comes with the clarity and the ability that humans have that no other animals have. We can foresee regrets before they occur. That's powerful. Going back to what you said before, living in that distracted state, sure, it might not be as mentally challenging as someone who's very clear with how they act and having a big picture, but it still comes with pain. And maybe the mental pain isn't as good, but you might pass away 10, 15 years earlier if, for example, you've been drinking alcohol every day to numb yourself. So no matter what, we have hard decisions. They're never going to be easy. And it's our job to figure out, how can we embrace the hard things in life? And once you figure out that, for me, it's really been the bigger picture, having a purpose bigger than myself. Because heck, if it's just for Justin, man, I'm not going to perform at my highest capabilities. But if it's for the whole world, and it's sort of an egotistical thought that what I do every day affects the whole world. But I can laugh at that at the same time, knowing that, sure, my actions might not, but they might as well. It's a very interesting thing to think of. Can one person's thoughts and actions change the whole world? And I think it's one of those, choose the better heart rather than being lazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the constant goal. Which heart do you want? How do you choose the better heart? How do you keep it in mind when that inner child of you that's screaming, saying, I want to do all this other stuff, I want life, but choosing it anyway. Going back to the idea that, how do you create a structure for yourself so that you remind yourself, like, no, this is what I'm doing. And I think this is that spiritual life. This is that slowing down aspect. At least it is for me. Because unless I am constantly in touch with things that remind me to that hard is worth it, that is better. And you're right, it often is like, how do I do this for other people? Because if I'm just going to do it for me, who really cares? It doesn't really matter. Having a pro-social orientation, realizing that we're part of something bigger, is motivating, and it gives us life. We're not the monkey who was not alone in the savannah died. Like we need to be connected to others. We just also need to be choiceful about who those others are. It's an interesting balance.
Right. Nothing comes easily. Really, this brings me back to, you have to go through a bit of suffering to realize the people you don't want to be around. I was in a toxic relationship for a long time that I am now very grateful for, because had I not gone through that, I would not be where I am today. And that's the intriguing part of every single day. The rainy, the coldest days, they make us appreciate the sunny, warm days. And I can't overemphasize the importance of shifting your mindset, or at least trying to be grateful and appreciate what you have in the moment. I love how animals can help us do this. With your example of your dog being sprawled out on the couch, I often find myself in my own head being negative. I take a glance at my dogs outside fighting or having a big smile on, rolling in the dirt, and it just brings me grounded. It brings me back to just appreciation of the moment. And there's so many distractions, like you mentioned. It is very hard to be enlightened unless we are continuously reminding ourselves. So I do have a nightly routine, just like Marcus Aurelius of the past. He would always journal at night, and that's been helping me a lot lately. I play that music and write down how my day went, and that's like something very small, very overlooked by the average materialistic kid my age. I'm only 23. And if a lot of people are beginning to resonate with me, which is amazing. But of course, not everyone is going to be so enlightened, and you can't really expect that. It's a fine balance, but hey, as long as we can help one person, that's good for me.
Yeah. I think a lot about one of the myths that kind of social media tells us, and kind of our normal world, is like that we need lots of people, that we need lots of different stuff. I mean, people have now also become stuff, right? More followers. Dunbar has a really interesting study about like how many people you can actually really know. I think about followings, and people have like however many millions of followers, and yet like we're was designed as a people to like, really, most folks like prior to even 200 years ago, they didn't know more than 500 people. Like that was like the wildest stretch, and that was like the most fringe of people that you could possibly know. And we really only are capable of having like intimate, good relationships with around 4 or 5 people. And so we don't need that many. In fact, we can't have that many good people in our lives. And so, in your 20s, like it's almost a good thing to keep finding people that you don't resonate with. All right, cool. I don't need you. Like I don't need you to be that part of my life. But when you find those 1 or 2, or maybe you're lucky enough to find lots, that's awesome. You can treasure it. But I think just being really clear about like human limitations, like if you have like 4 or 5, like you are more set than most people, especially if they actually know you well. So,
The small circle is so important. And it's funny how it's pushed on us that we should have all the things, all the friends, everyone should like me. Why would everyone not like me?
yeah.
When in reality, the small circle of 3, 4, however many works for you, but just understand that you need authenticity in relationships. That is so much more important than having a big group of acquaintances that are yes men. I would much rather have someone who won't sugarcoat a thing for me than 5 yes men telling me everything I do is grand, when in actuality, I'm making some mistakes. Like, it really can't be underestimated, the importance of real, true people who value integrity, who will correct you. And that is just a vital part of flourishing. I really look forwards to meeting more and more people through having these conversations. I am making friendships because even though we're talking through a screen, it is so crazy how I did not have these deep conversations all throughout high school. And sure, I had 20, 30, 40 friends, acquaintances, but having deep conversations, I never did this with kids in high school. So it's very empowering to realize the depth of a one-on-one conversation compared to being in a group of acquaintances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more you cultivate a life of connection, cultivate a life of purpose and stillness, the conversations come to you because it's just what you start emanating. And people who love that will run towards it. And people who are like, oh my God, I cannot stand that all, will get away. And it actually works really well. But the people who are more on the fence, you show up consistently over time and they become inspired by you. And so I say keep on the path, man. Keep having the conversation.
I thank you so much, Drew. Having these, we should leave off with the premise, my audience, focus on connectivity and being authentic. You do not need a huge group of people around you, but take very important care of the ones who are honest with you, and the consistent people who do not waver in their personality. They're consistently real with you. Those are the people that we need around ourselves. So again, thank you, Drew. This was a fabulous conversation, and I'm sure we provided a lot of value. I learned from this, so I know for a fact others will learn from this.
Awesome. I enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me. And I hope that all your audience continues to grow and that we all do. So thanks for your time.